Hi, Dan. It's so great to have you back on the show. And I want to thank the team at WPCurve for helping me improve my website site speed from a deplorable F to a B. I'm really thrilled to have you on my show again to share your knowledge about why WordPress website owners should care about site speed. But before we dive into that, let's start with introducing yourself to the audience. Who are you, and how did you get started with your business, WPCurve?
Okay, well, thanks for having me. My name's Dan Norris. My business is WPCurve. We launched 8 or 9 months ago, I think, and we offer small WordPress jobs and maintenance and support for a monthly subscription of $69. And yeah, I mean that's really what we do. We started that 8 or 9 months ago, and we're doing exactly the same thing now. We're just doing it for a lot more people. We're growing rapidly and building the team out and trying to help people have better WordPress sites that run faster and don't crash and don't get hacked and all of those kind of things.
So tell me, what exactly your business model is. It seems like you have service packages. So how does that work?
Yeah, well, we do unlimited jobs, which means, some clients might request 2 or 3 jobs a month. Some might request none. Some might request 10. But we just have the one. We only have 2 plans. One is $69, and the $99 plan is the same thing, but we do proactive fixes on that plan. So when new plugins come out, we upgrade them and we do a security scan and we do a couple of proactive things each month. But essentially, there's only really one plan.
Okay, so the only difference is proactive for the 99. So that means that I'm not going in the back end and pushing the button to upgrade WordPress or, updating all the plugins. You guys do that.
Yeah. So, I mean, a lot of our clients these days are pretty tech savvy and they know that when they see plugins, they need to be updated and they do that themselves. But some clients just aren't and they're not in WordPress enough and their sites get out of date and they become insecure and they just want someone to look after all of it. So they pay a little bit extra.
And does each package, is that only for one site per package, or can you include up to a certain amount of sites?
Yeah, it's only per site. So
Okay.
we've got a couple of clients with more than one site and they just have to pay more than once. But generally, if you're a business with a lot of websites, then we're probably not the right choice. It's more just for businesses who just have one site, not sort of like internet marketers with like 10 or 20 sites.
Okay, so what is your, your typical customer? Who do you serve?
It varies really. I mean, we don't really look for any particular customers. The only thing that is common across all of our customers is that they have real businesses and they use WordPress. So, I mean, if you don't have if you're not making any money from your site or from your business, then you're probably not going to want to pay a monthly fee to have someone help you with it. But that's about it. I mean, our customers range from, they're all around the world. Some online businesses, a lot of offline businesses, some bigger companies, but mostly smallish sort of businesses with a couple of staff and typical kind of small business revenue.
Yeah, I think any bigger business would probably have an in-house team or person that would be managing their site. So yeah, I think like for a lot of like smaller businesses, like they're either outsourcing the dev work to somebody else, be it in an offshore contractor in India or the Philippines, or somebody that they might know locally.
Yeah, that's right. And I mean, we have a bunch of startups as customers as well. And even those guys, like they're probably technically proficient enough to fix some of this stuff themselves. But for the sake of $70 a month, having us there 24/7 just makes their life a little bit easier and they can kind of focus on what they're doing. So I think our business has appeal to a lot of people as long as you're comfortable paying the monthly subscription.
Did you go through a process of trying to profile and identify your target customer?
Yeah, we did, but it failed miserably.
Yeah, I mean, okay, I gotta tell you, like, every business coach that I work with is like, oh, the first thing you have to do is sit down and work out who your, ideal customer is. And it's really kind of interesting because you can get an idea of what this person is and get an idea of what their, age range or their income or demographic is. Or it might actually look a lot like you because you know what your pain points are. But, I think it's kind of interesting. I'm interested in seeing like, how accurate that process is for people in terms of connecting with their target audience, or is it a good exercise to do, but chances are the reality might be very different?
Yeah, I think it's one of those things that just doesn't apply to every business. I mean, some businesses really suit going after a particular type of business. Like, I was talking to a company yesterday who make a body scrub, like a coffee body scrub thing, like made out of used coffee beans or used like ground coffee. And their business is exploding, and they knew exactly the type of person who wanted to buy that product, and they knew exactly where they hung out and what kind of stuff they liked sharing on Instagram. Like, they knew where to target them and how to target them. And I mean, for that kind of business, it works perfectly well. But
That's
for other
fascinating.
businesses, yeah, and their business completely exploded. Like, they've got, I think, 220,000 followers on Instagram. They only started a year ago.
Wow. So who was their target customer?
Young girls.
Young hippie girls.
Yeah, well, young girls. Yeah, young girls. I guess I don't know exactly like how targeted they got. I think they approached like young bloggers and people who are like blogging about kind of natural. I mean, I don't really understand that market. I don't really know why someone would want to rub coffee on themselves and take a photo of themselves, but they obviously do. It's obviously worked very
220,000
well.
followers on Instagram of young girls covered in coffee grounds.
Yeah, it's worth a look if you're into that kind of thing, for sure.
Okay, all right, I'll take a peek. Okay, so it worked for them, but you're saying it doesn't really work for every business.
No, I mean, it's not something that I've really ever done in my business, and I've kind of felt a little bit of guilt about that for a while because everyone told me I should. But now I just think it doesn't make sense. I mean, having a broad market for your product, to me, I think is a good idea. And I know we can just keep growing this business, and we're not going to have to target a certain type of person. There's really no need to. I mean, we deliberately went after a big market so we could grow a big business. So
yeah, that makes a lot of sense with your particular business. I mean, pretty much anyone that has a WordPress site that doesn't want to have, their time and energy sucked into dealing with it is pretty much fair game. Who has a business, obviously, like who their WordPress site, is their business website.
Yeah, and they self-select by, deciding whether or not to pay a subscription to solve this problem. A lot of people, if they didn't have a real business and they're just kind of messing around with a website, they wouldn't sign up to start with because they don't have that monthly revenue to just allocate towards that. They just go somewhere and pay a cheap developer to do a one-off fix or something. Mm-hmm. So there is a little bit of self-selecting that happens without us really having to do anything, just by the fact that we charge a subscription instead of a one-off fee.
Great. So let me ask you, going back to the original purpose of this interview, why should WordPress owners care about site speed?
Yeah, well, there's probably a few reasons. I mean, SEO is the one that gets talked about often. That's not the primary reason why I wanted to increase our site speed, because the main thing for me was it's just a branding thing. Like you want to have a nice design on your site. It's probably hard to explain why you want a nice design, but you just do because you want to look like a legitimate company. And I think site speed has a lot to do with that as well. Like, if you go to a website that's really slow, it takes 20 seconds to load, then, I mean, you're going to do a bunch of things. You're going to probably not convert. You're probably not going to give them your email address. You'll probably bounce. But at the very least, you will definitely have a lower opinion of that company because you'll just tell that they haven't put any effort into their website. So I think it's a branding and positioning thing, and obviously it helps with SEO and helps with conversions and bounce rates and all of those things as well.
So what tools can website owners use to test whether or not their website speed is up to par?
I think the easiest one is the Pingdom speed test tool, and that one will tell you how fast your site is loading, and it does it in a way that's not going to scare you off too much. It kind of has a lot of data there, but it hides it all from you, so you get a nice pretty picture first, and then if you want to delve in more, you can. But there's a few things you can do with that. One is you can find out how long it's taking to load the site, and generally we sort of benchmark as if it's over sort of 4 or 5 seconds, we'd start thinking maybe you should improve something. If it's under 3 seconds or around that, then for most businesses that's probably okay. I think we managed to get ours to about half a second on the best test.
Wow, that's great! Fantastic.
Yeah, we went a little bit crazy.
Mine's hovering around 4 to 6, somewhere around there.
Yeah, yours was. I did yours today, and it was 3. But the Pingdom tool does tend to be a little bit inconsistent. Sometimes it'll give you 3 seconds, then it'll be 4 seconds or whatever. But yeah, that kind of range is okay. We've had clients that are like sort of 7 or 8 seconds or 10 seconds or 20 seconds, and when it gets to that kind of territory, or the other thing we've had is like a client who'll be 2 seconds one day and then 20 seconds the next day because their host is just really inconsistent. And that's obviously a big problem.
Interesting. Yeah, when I tested my site on GT metrics, I was originally showing up as 20 seconds page load time. And GT metrics also indicates all the different areas that are a problem that should be fixed. Does the Pingdom tool do that too?
Yeah, it does. It just does it in a little bit of a different way. Both of them are good. Both of them are sort of better at different things. Well, one of the good things about Pingdom is you can really easily sort by the size of the file. Like a lot of the times, the reason the site will be loading slowly is because the site's just too big. And so you put it into Pingdom, it'll tell you how big the site is. And if it's over like a 1 megabyte or 2 megabytes, like that kind of size, then there's a good chance you can reduce the speed increase the speed, I guess is the right way to say it, by reducing the file size. And Pingdom make it really easy for you to work out what the big files are because you can just sort by the file size. GT metrics do a bunch of stuff. A lot of it's sort of like really minor fixes. Like they'll do things like using CSS sprites to reduce image file size, and that might save you like 0.001 of a second. But it'll list that up the top and give you like an F for that and make you feel really guilty.
Oh gosh, okay. Oh no.
So yeah, you can just keep going. Like we did about a week's worth of work on our site to get it to under 1 second, and we could have kept going. Like I think by the end we got to about 98 on GT metrics, and that was enough. But yeah, the main things are the size of the site, the hosting obviously is a big thing. The amount of plugins and just the amount of external resources the site uses are probably the four big reasons why sites are slow.
Okay. So, well, gosh, it's kind of tough to get around the plugin issue because, if you want a certain type of functionality, the way to get that functionality in WordPress is usually through a plugin, unless you know how to hard code that feature in. But anything that seems to be a little more complex, not just something that you want to have appear in your sidebar, for example, seems to involve a plugin. So How on earth do you know which plugins to use for WordPress? I mean, there's so many plugins, and many of these plugins actually do very similar things. Like there's a gazillion social sharing plugins for WordPress. Have you guys identified like the best of breed WordPress plugins for the most common features that WordPress website owners want, but the ones that are the most reliable, best supported, and have the least amount of drag on your website?
Yeah, I mean, we haven't specifically looked at like best plugins for speed. The social sharing one's interesting because I know Flare have a few inbuilt features where they actually store the social sharing numbers in your database and cache them so that it's not going off to the network each time to get the latest up-to-date number of shares. And that can be a problem in itself because the shares can be out of date and that kind of thing. So there's sort of pros and cons with all of this stuff. And we generally have favorite plugins that we install. But, I mean, if a client site's running really slow, it often won't be because they haven't installed the best plugin. It will just be because they've installed too many plugins. I mean, there are some plugins that are particularly problematic, but in a lot of cases, it's because they've either installed plugins and then forgot that they don't need them, or they've just gone crazy. Like we had a guy the other day who had 55 plugins.
Wow.
And I mean, and he was kind of like, well, can you like reduce my image size and like minify my CSS and this kind of stuff? And I'm like, man, we can do that stuff, but the reason your site is slow because you just got way too much going on there.
Were they 55 plugins that he was using?
No one uses 55 plugins.
Okay, yeah. I mean, sometimes it can be easy to forget which plugins are actually active. I mean,
that's what happens. Yeah, that's what happens. I mean, you do things like, like when you move to WP Engine, you might install the WP Engine Migrator plugin, or when you move from WordPress.com to WordPress.org, you might have like a bunch of WordPress.com plugins still installed on your site. And a lot of times people don't actually know which ones they need, and they might have plugins on there that are particularly slow that they don't even use or that they haven't published that are still slowing the site down. So that's a common plugin. The other thing you can do is install a plugin called P3 Profiler, which will tell you which plugins are particularly slow.
Oh, that's good to know.
Yeah, and then you've got to uninstall it because it's slow itself.
Okay, just let it do its job and then, and then get rid of it, right?
Yeah. But I think a lot of it is about compromise too. Like with our site, we just decided, like we did a little bit of tricky stuff on our site. Like we wrote the code in a certain way so that it would load after the page displays, for some plugins. But mainly we just compromised a little bit on what could be on the site. We had less stuff on the site, and I was happy to do that to get a faster site, because I think having a faster site is more important than having a blog that shows your number of tweets or whatever. So I think there is a little bit of compromise that you can do to, if you decide speed's more important, then you just turn those plugins off.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, is speed more important than social proof, for example?
That's right. And I mean, the way you got to think about it is speed more important than social proof on your blog homepage, for example. So
right.
On our blog posts, we have the numbers on there because I think that that's where people share from. And I think people are much more likely to share if they go to a blog post and see it's got 100 tweets, then they're much more likely to share that post. But on the blog homepage, I don't know, it's probably 50-50, but I kind of think usually people are just going to click on a post on that page and get taken through to the actual post itself. So I think I just decided I could live without them on that page.
So going back to the indispensable plugin list, are there a few that come to mind that you think that every WordPress website owner should install?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a few that I couldn't bring myself to uninstall on our own site, and we normally suggest clients have them. Yoast SEO is one. You just can't really do all of the SEO stuff without it, or without either a theme that does it or some SEO plugin. And the Yoast one seems to be the easiest one for people to use.
Yeah, it's great. I like it.
Yeah. What else? I mean, we use the Discuss for our comments, and that's not so much related to speed. It's probably slower to have Discuss on there because it's loading from an external site. But there are just so many benefits with Discuss that I think it's worth it. And you end up getting a lot less spam and a lot less spammy comments clogging up the back of your site and stuff. So I think on balance, it makes more sense to have that than it makes to have another commenting plugin plus a spam plugin plus click this box if you're a spammer and add 6+5 if you're not a spammer and all this kind of stuff.
I used to have the Facebook sharing plugin, and why I like the idea of people making comments on my blog and then having it publish automatically to their Facebook profile, to their Facebook wall. It was constantly breaking. So I just got really frustrated and had you guys swap it out for Discuss. Yeah,
it's also a bit ugly in it, and people, I mean, not everyone's on Facebook and not everyone wants to share on Facebook either. So I think a lot of people will run two different comment systems, which is kind of messy. And so yeah, I think Discuss is good, and you can do moderation via email with Discuss as well. So if we get on the rare situation where we get spam or we get a comment that I don't want to be on there, then I can just reply delete via email, and I can reply to comments via email, and all of that is good. Not really related to speed, but still a good plugin to have.
Anything else?
What else do we say?
What about a caching plugin?
Yeah, that depends a lot on the hosting. So I think best practice is to have a managed WordPress host that handles that stuff on the server. Next best is probably to run W3 Total Cache and a CDN like Cloudflare, which if people don't know what I'm talking about, it's probably just going to go straight over their heads. But
yeah, explain what a CDN is and how it works.
So with something like WP Engine, well, actually, forget WP Engine for now. If say you've got a site that's hosted on GoDaddy or whatever, all of the media files on your site. So say you've got PDF downloads and you've got big images or videos or whatever, you can set those files up so they're hosted on a CDN, and the CDN means that wherever the visitor is located in the world, it will deploy that file from a server that's close to them rather than going all the way back to GoDaddy to do it.
But are you talking about media files that are hosted directly on the site? For example,
video is probably not a good example because most people use external services for that.
Yeah, they use YouTube or Vimeo.
Yeah, yeah. So normally images and files, PDFs and stuff like that.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because audio, for example, I use Libsyn, so that's hosted elsewhere. But yeah, for sure, images is probably the big one.
Yeah, well, we host our podcast audio files on our site as well, and images you can use an external host as well. But having a CDN is kind of like having an external service hosting all of your files. And something like Cloudflare is free. If you're not running an SSL on your site, which means like if you're not taking a credit card number on your site, then generally you won't have an SSL, which means you can install Cloudflare for free, which is pretty cool.
So how would that work then? So let's say I currently upload all my images directly to WordPress. So what's the benefit of uploading my images to Cloudflare instead?
Well, you don't have to. They just take a snapshot of your site and they show people the snapshot. So you don't
so I would still upload the image directly into WordPress, but then Cloudflare is showing somebody in India, for example, a snapshot of my site.
Yeah, so like the images and whatnot are like cached on Cloudflare servers. And the other thing they can do is, which is cool, is if your site goes down, they can show people like a cached version of the whole site, which means like it effectively isn't down for them, which is a nice feature.
Okay, so it sounds like pretty much everyone should get on to Cloudflare because it's free.
Well, that again depends on your host. So with WP Engine, they have a CDN that's part of their package. So like we're on the professional plan with them. And as part of the professional plan, they have integration with Max CDN, which is a competitor, I guess, is kind of a competitor to Cloudflare. And with WP Engine, you can just literally click a button, and that turns Max CDN on, and that's designed to work with their system. So when we moved to WP Engine, we shut down our Cloudflare account, which we were paying for because we have an SSL on our site. But yeah, using a CDN is a good idea. Site speed is a complex issue. It might not necessarily increase the amount of seconds it takes your site to load, but it will help things like images load faster in different areas. And with something like Cloudflare, you do get the extra benefits like that kind of the caching if your site goes down and stuff like that. Like if your site's getting, and they've got things where if your site's getting like attacked or whatever, then it will limit those and display an up version of your site. So there's nice features like that.
So what are your thoughts on managed WordPress hosting solutions? Like, a lot of small businesses, they start on the cheapest hosting plan, and they sign up with a cheap web host like HostGator or Bluehost or GoDaddy. What are the advantages of moving to a hosted WordPress solution like WP Engine?
Yeah, well, there's a few things. The one thing that we noticed straight away was we got a 54% increase in speed when we moved.
Oh.
And we were on a VPS before that, so it wasn't like we were on a shared server with 1,000 sites on it. So that was a pretty big increase. And there's an easy way that we kind of encourage people to check that. You can go onto the Google Page Speed Insights tool, which I haven't mentioned yet, but that's probably the third of the 3 big speed-related tools you can use. And when you put your site into that tool, and you click on the desktop, because it defaults to the mobile view, but if you click on the desktop view, it'll give you a bunch of things to improve, and you can look at the server response time. And I've found that like when our clients are hosted on WP Engine, that test gets passed every time. When they're hosted on a shared host, sometimes that can be like a really big killer. Like sometimes it can be like a 1-second delay, sometimes it can be a 10-second delay. And if your host is slowing down your page speed by 10 seconds, then obviously you're going to get a huge benefit from moving to a managed host. So that's one thing. I think WP Engine have a better way of managing stuff like caching and like the CDN, all of that stuff and backups. Like one of the good things about being on WP Engine is you don't need a backup plugin, for example, or a caching plugin. So immediately you're getting rid of 2 plugins, one of which is probably going to slow your site down because running backups is like a resource-intensive thing to do. So there are a bunch of things that are better done on the server and not inside WordPress. And if you're on a managed host, it's easy to do that. Probably the other benefit with WP Engine is the staging area. And that's just like a really simple one-click duplicate of your site. So you can duplicate the site to staging, then you can go make a bunch of changes to it and test them in the real live environment before you actually make them live on your site. And that's a big time saver.
Okay. Yeah, definitely. It's great if you're expecting or planning to do a site redesign sometime in the future.
Yeah, even just for little things like if you want to like install a new plugin and see how it affects the speed, or if you're just testing new plugins and you just don't want to do it on the live site, or if you've got a change that you think might impact on something that's happening on the site, then you can do all that on staging. New themes, testing out new themes is another good one if you're thinking of changing themes. And yeah, depending on your site, WP Engine aren't suitable for everyone because they've got a few funny rules about being on there. But if your site is kind of suitable for them, then I think it's a no-brainer. Like for us, to pay $100 a month for hosting is a complete no-brainer when we're getting all of those benefits. And if you fit into their smaller plan, which is like $30 a month, then it's really not that much more than you'd be paying elsewhere.
So do you know some of their rules? Like, why wouldn't you fit in? Are they, for example, affiliate marketing friendly, or are they not into adult sites? I mean, how does...
So I'm not so sure about that. I think the things like they don't allow some plugins. Like I don't think they allow email marketing plugins, for example.
Okay.
So it's things like things that you really shouldn't be doing inside of WordPress, because WordPress really should be about your public-facing website. And people use WordPress to host backup software or like email marketing software or whatever, or like backlink checkers. That's another one that they don't allow, like scanning your site for broken backlinks. That kind of stuff is best done outside of WordPress. And if you're happy to play along with that way of thinking, then you'll be fine. But if you like have these plugins that you rely on that WP Engine won't let you have, then you're in trouble. But the main thing I've found with WP Engine is like the way they structure their plans, and they have limits around the size of the site, which usually isn't too much of a problem. It's more the amount of visits that tends to be a problem. So they charge you more if you have a certain amount of visits, and if like sometimes it can work out really cheap, but if you're in that sort of range where they start charging you more, it can work out quite expensive to host your site.
Yeah. So, what about WordPress themes? Are there any impacts? Do some WordPress themes have an impact on site speed as well?
Definitely, yeah. I mean, the theme can have a huge impact, and for a whole bunch of reasons. It could just be the fact that the developer has installed a whole bunch of external services as part of the theme. Like common ones are like, say like the theme displays a featured image on the home page, then some theme developers will have that feature image just at whatever size it is on the site, and they'll resize it in HTML so it looks at that particular size, and that's going to kill your site speed. Others will run services that optimize that image, and the service itself might have an impact on your site speed. And just the images themselves could be not optimized. There could be a whole bunch of old code. With our site, as I said, we went a little bit over the top on ours, so we completely scrapped what we had before, and we started completely from scratch. We didn't use a framework, we didn't use anything, and we just put whatever code we needed in there. For most people, it's probably acceptable to just make sure you get a theme from like a reputable theme provider rather than kind of going out randomly and downloading a free WordPress theme, which can be particularly problematic. And there's potentially worse things that people can do with themes that aren't just related to site speed, but yeah, they're probably the main ones.
Do you have any theme recommendations that are top of mind? I'm running on Genesis framework. I find it to be really pretty good.
Yeah, Genesis is good. We have a few clients using that. I think if you use a framework, you probably can't go too wrong, like Thesis or Genesis, or I think where people get into trouble, we don't really have a recommendation because I think like the best thing to do is probably to code your theme from scratch, but not everyone can do that.
Yeah, especially if you're non tech savvy and you're trying to hire someone to do that offshore, and you have absolutely no idea whether that developer offshore is a good coder.
Yeah, that's right. And also, like, it comes down to maintenance as well. Like, it's easy for me to say you should code your theme to scratch, but I've got a team of 8 developers I can use whenever I have a problem. So I think for most people, it probably makes sense to use like a framework like Genesis and just find a nice looking theme, but just not something that's completely loaded with images, because even just the amount of content on the page and the way those images are optimized. So like pay attention to how big the files are that you're uploading into WordPress. And I think that you can't go too wrong if you're not having like a giant site with lots of big images and sliders and stuff like that are just going to like load in much more data than you really need to be there.
Mm-hmm. So WordPress is supposed to be SEO friendly out of the box. I kind of find that it really isn't. I mean, it is, but it kind of isn't. And I've always had to do additional optimization to really make it more search engine friendly. Can you share with us what SEO tweaks every WordPress owner should consider making to their site?
Yeah, so probably the main one, I mean, you need to turn permalinks on. So just going into settings, permalinks, and putting in post name so that when people go to a page on your site, the address in that page is named after the name of the page that you give it. So that's obviously something that everyone has to do. What else? Yoast SEO is very good. So if you release a blog post and you can use Yoast to basically decide what keyword you want to target. So for this one, you might target WordPress speed, and when you go into the blog post, you can rename the URL to entrepreneursforachange.com/WordPress speed, and you can tell Yoast that you want to target WordPress speed, and it'll give you a bunch of ticks if you've correctly put it in the title and the page and whatnot. They're probably the two main things you have to do. The other stuff is really like there's some basic theme stuff that has to happen. Like on those blog pages, you'd normally have a H1 tag that would have the title that you give it, and there'd be a title tag on the page. Normally that stuff is taken care of, like unless you've got a really old theme or something, then that stuff is normally just taken care of by the theme developer, and that's all stuff you have to do once. There's not much else really. Yoast puts in a sitemap, and it does a bunch of other things. It enables you to change the title tag on your homepage pretty easily and that kind of thing. I think they're probably the main things. I think WordPress is generally pretty good. I mean, the term SEO friendly is a little bit subjective, I think. But yeah, I think they're probably the main things, and the speed as well. If you have a slow site, it's going to hurt it. So if you can do everything to make it quicker, then that helps too.
Yeah, I mean, it is kind of all relative, this whole effort to try to optimize for search engines. I mean, one example is, okay, an SEO best practice is to minimize code bloat because it can impact your site speed and negatively impact SEO because you've got all this excess code that's on your pages that's actually, getting in the way of search engine spiders accessing the indexable content on the pages. And so one thing that I've discovered is, when I actually look at the source code for all my WordPress pages, there's all kinds of JavaScript, all kinds of CSS in these pages, and a lot of them are coming from the plugins. And so one of the best practices is to offload all the JS files to a single external JS file, and the same for CSS files, but you actually can't do this with WordPress sites. It seems. Can you?
Yeah, I mean, how? It's not you can't do it. It's more that it's not always necessarily in your interest to do it. So it's kind of complicated. I mean, you can get plugins that will combine your JavaScript files into one file. You can get plugins that will minify like your CSS and your JavaScript. We're not doing that on our side at the moment because we found there's problems with that, and some clients have problems. Some sites it works, some sites it doesn't. In terms of external files, sometimes there's a bit of technical stuff going on there where, like, sometimes if, say, you've got 4 or 5 external files loading from a CDN and 4 or 5 loading from your site, that might actually be quicker, especially if they're not all loading on the same at the same time on the same page. That might actually be quicker than installing another plugin that will combine them all and create one large file that sits in your database. So yeah, that's just one of those things where, like, if you really wanted to sit there tweaking for days and days, you might find a slightly better way to do it. But generally, a better way to handle that is just to not have so many external services. And again, it could be plugins, it could be the theme. In terms of code, it could also be the code you're putting into the post itself. Like, people will copy and paste stuff across from Word or whatever, and that will create a whole bunch of code in there that you don't need. The theme developers might have a whole bunch of code in there that they don't need, and it's just kind of been added over time. There might be like 4 or 5 CSS files that have just been added in over time, and I don't know. It depends how crazy you want to go with it, whether you want to completely scrap it and start again, or just decide to reduce a few plugins, or just kind of accept that it's, you're going to be in like the 4-second range as opposed to the 1-second range kind of thing.
Yeah, sometimes you just have to pick your battles.
Yeah. I mean, I think for 99% of people, like, they don't need a site that loads in 1 second. But if you do have an old site and you haven't kept it up to date, and it's kind of really slow, and it's starting to impact your brand, and it's, affecting bounce rate and stuff like that, and some people just really need a new theme. Other people just need to compromise on some of the plugins, or ditch a couple of plugins that are particularly problematic, or optimize the images or whatever.
So any other thoughts on optimizing site speed?
No, that's probably it. Probably another thing is with the GT metrics tool that I didn't mention, which is pretty cool. They do a thing where like if they analyze your page speed, they'll tell you what images need to be optimized, and it doesn't really display them in a way that makes it obvious how bigger gains you'll get by replacing them. It just kind of says, like if you have an image on there that's like 10 kilobytes, it'll say this image could potentially be 5 kilobytes, and that's a 50% saving, which is kind of useless information because there's not a lot of point in saving 5 kilobytes when you might have other images on there that are, you could save 50 kilobytes. But one cool thing that it does do is it optimizes the images for you. So if you have absolutely no idea how to do this, you can go into the GT metrics tool and it will optimize the images for you, and you can actually download them and re-upload them into WordPress over the top of your current ones, which is kind of cool.
Oh, that's great.
The other thing is there's one called Smush It, which will shrink down the images that are currently on your site. But that's also a plugin that you can use.
So does Smush It actually shrink down the images that are baked into your theme, as well as any that you might have uploaded into posts?
That's a good question. I don't know. I don't think so. I think it's just the media library.
I see. Okay, but that's still good to have, regardless.
Yeah, and actually the other tip that I wrote a big post about WordPress speed, and the other thing I put in there was pay attention to your high traffic pages, because like you can go through and optimize all the images on your 1,000 different pages, but if 80% of the people are hitting your homepage, then you may as well spend 80% of your time optimizing your homepage. And generally, it's pretty easy to optimize one page because you can just go to a tool like GT Metrics. It'll tell you every single image on there that's too big, or how many external JavaScript calls there are and stuff like that. So if you just pick those two or three big pages, which will generally be your homepage. If you've got a blog, then your blog homepage is another one. Like our blog homepage I think is our second or third highest traffic page. So they're the two pages that we really focus on optimizing.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much. We're about coming to the end of our interview. I would love to ask you about failure, because as we know, the road to entrepreneurial success is usually littered with a lot of failures along the way. And I'd love to ask you if you have a story of failure that you'd like to share with us.
I can't remember what I told you last time. I've got a lot of failure stories.
Okay. I can't remember what you told me last time also. Gosh.
I think, I could tell you 100 different stories. I think, like,
Okay, is there one that's funny? Or one that's just utterly ego-crushing?
Depends how sad you are as a person. But no, I just think there's a few things I've learned from the many, many different failures that I've had. One is that you just got to try a lot of things, and you just don't know what's going to work. Like even this year, we've had, or since we launched WPCurve, which is 9 months, I think, we've had 4 different businesses at any one time that we focused on. And as of today, 3 out of 4 have failed. And that's just been in the last 9 months. So that's 75% failure rate. But all we've done is we've dropped everything else and we're focused on WPCurve because that's the one that didn't fail. So I think part of it is definitely just going with the momentum of whatever's working and trying a lot of things. The other part, which has been a big learning of mine, is not to act too much on assumptions. And we talked about this last time I spoke to you, but that's been a big lesson of mine is whenever we're kind of debating what to do with the business, and if we'll find ourselves making assumptions about what people want or whatever, or what people will like, or what product to launch, or how much we should charge, then we kind of stop ourselves and just get it out as quickly as we can and start looking at how people actually behave and how much they pay, what feedback we get, rather than debating stuff for ages and ages and focusing on assumptions.
So how do you know when to pull the plug?
Well, I think you need to set yourself some targets. Like with our community, I don't know if I've talked about this before, but a month ago we shut down our community. So
the content community.
Yeah.
Really? Okay. So I was like, I didn't sign up for that. I was just going to wait till, it kind of matured a little and then I could see where I was in my stage of growth and whether it fits. So, wow, you shut that down completely. Okay. Why?
Yeah. At the same time, we terminated, I think, 22 paying customers and that was at the start of last month. So the start of March. It was funny. We churned 22 customers and we dropped by 6. That was 6% of our monthly recurring revenue. And then by the end of the month, we'd grown by 15% over that 6%. So we'd effectively grown by 20% or something in the month of March.
The content community.
Sorry?
The content community?
Well, just as a business as a side, when we shut down the community, we grew our business by 15%.
Oh,
despite
okay.
the fact that we cut off 22 paying monthly customers.
Okay, and so you were able to free the time, energy, and resources for the more lucrative part of your business by shutting down the community.
That's right, yeah. And I don't know if it's so much time. I think maybe it's just the fact that when you're working on something, it's not going well, it's just kind of obvious to people, and it just kind of decides for itself that it's not going to work out. And we could just see it going backwards. Like we started with about 40 members and people weren't really engaging with what we were doing on there, and members were dropping off and we weren't signing up new members, and we kind of set ourselves a goal to sign up a certain amount of members within a month to make sure we could keep growing it. And it's good with a recurring business that the equation is quite simple. Like you need to be getting more customers each month than those leaving, and we weren't doing that, so it was quite easy to decide that it obviously wasn't working.
Okay, great. So, Dan, what is the most effective way to change the world?
Your questions are too hard.
Well, hey, at least I'm giving you the opportunity to think about this very profound life question. So
yeah.
It's something you can continue to think about beyond this interview. I definitely recommend, highly endorse that.
Yeah. Well, I think a good starting point is kind of finding your place in the world, and that takes a long time. And I mean, for me, I've really spent my whole life trying to especially in business, is to find a type of business that really suits me, and a business where I can start to really impact people. And it's probably a selfish way of looking at it, but I think that's definitely a good start, because you could just spend most of your life doing something that you're not really that in tune with. And I think a lot of people do that, and I think you find that you're capable of a lot more when you're doing something that you're really in tune with and really in sync with. And I think, and also having people around you as well that are supportive and that you're in tune with as well. And that's been a big difference with me as well, with my new business partner, compared to before. It was I was just kind of out there on my own doing something I wasn't really good at, and it was just a mess. But now we're both kind of doing what each of us are good at, and I think we're starting to have much more of an impact. We're getting our message out to a lot more people and helping a lot more people, and so I think that's a good starting point.
Yeah, I don't really think, what you just said is selfish at all. I mean, I think far too many people spend the entirety of their lives trying to be someone they're not because of all the pressure and all the messages from their family or society that they need to be a certain way. And I personally believe that every individual has their zone of genius. And when they're able to really connect, when you're able to really connect with who you are and what gifts you have to really offer, then you can actually really thrive, but not only thrive on a personal level, but really be of greater service or bigger impact when you are operating from your zone of genius, as opposed to trying to be good at something you're not, or trying to fit into a role that just doesn't really suit you. So I really think it starts with self-discovery and having the real courage to look at yourself and to ask yourself, who am I, and what do I really want to do?
I think trying a lot of things as well. I think it's not necessarily external pressures that cause people to get in that state. I think it's also people just don't know, because they just haven't done enough and don't know, how they would be if they had their own business versus if they were in a job or whatever. So I think just having the courage to try a bunch of things and just being able to have that kind of self-awareness that when you find something that seems to be working well for you, that you should keep doing that and not doing the stuff that isn't working well.
Yeah. Okay, so how should we best stay in touch with you, Dan?
Yeah, well, our site is WPCurve.com. If you go there, WPCurve.com/blog is our blog. We've got a post up there on WordPress speed, and we've got about 250 other posts about all this kind of stuff. and I send out a weekly. I think there's an email subscribe in the footer on that site, and I send a weekly email. I've been doing that for about 5 years, and that's kind of how you can get our best content. If you want to talk to me, you can just email me, dan@wpcurve.com, or just Facebook, Twitter. I think Twitter is the Dan Norris, THE Dan Norris is my Twitter handle.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. You have a wonderful day, Dan.
Thank you, Lorna. You have a nice day too.